Okay, see you soon. So let us say within an enclosure, you have a large colony of ants. And in recognizing the ants are in the enclosure, you decide to give them food. And you give them a big pile of salt. And the ants would explore the salt and eventually start to take it back to within their colony. And after a period of time, all the ants would take is the salt. And it got used to the taste and all the qualities of salt. But soon the pile would run dry. And in another corner, you placed a large pile of sugar. And after a while, once the ants have discovered the sugar, their first instinct is to reject it. They see the sugar, at first looking like the salt, but their taste was very different. But with nothing else to eat, the ants begin to collect the sugar. And after a period of time, you would put salt and sugar next to each other. And try as you might, the ants will always reject the sugar, the salt. They would eat the sugar until all salt had been removed from their being and would never go back. The sugar within the colony gave so much more than the salt took away. And the direction in their life was now set. So if you was one of these ants, would you pick salt or sugar? And of course, this is not about ants at all. But it is the borderline between transition of experiences. When one is first faced with spiritual progress, one rejects it. Looks a little enticing, but one will stay with what one knows. One will always go back looking for the salt in its previous corner, thinking that is my habit, that is where my food lies, and that is what I must have. But as soon as one gets used to the sugar, gets used to the spiritual life, then one will not go back to the non-spiritual life. So to begin with, it is objectionable to change from salt to sugar. But one once tries it and starts to wash away the ill effects of the previous life, then the new way is set. So there must be the establishment of the new way at the expense of the old way. There must be the washing away of the previous life. There must be repetition on going back to the same pile of sugar. And then sugar becomes all that you want. It is the same with anger and love. Anger may be instinctive for a while. But once love is available, love is at first rejected until it's established. and then it is seen as only the way. And one will never go back to that position of anger once all the residue has been washed away. Now, this, I'm sure, would be very obvious and easy to accept. But when you're on the border between the two piles, one of sugar, one of salt, the old way is the most tempting. The new way, full of pain and difficulty. And often people will put their toe into a spiritual life and reject it. Where at first that sweetness may be there, but the old temptations are strong. But one must be true to themselves and stick to what they know. So at this border point, one needs reassurance and guidance and support. One needs to know which way to look for the right results. Sugar and salt looking very similar. But the guide would say, look inside. See what salt is doing for you and see what sugar is doing for you. So if the ant, or indeed yourself, was to look outwards and caught in the habit, then salt is appealing. As one trusts the guide, one looks inwards, and salt is rejected in favor of sugar. How often do you get to this border when you are contemplating whether to meditate or not? Whether to live by one virtue or another? To live what is the old way or this strange new way? Have you let all the sugar wash away all the salt? This, of course, is with experience. One starts to see and truly know the life with sugar. But how would you change if you were not first given the option? If no sugar was put into your compound, why would you even know of it? So it is with the blessing of some other force that sugar is made available to you. That other force is generally karma. Karma that comes available. Karma that you have generated some time ago. Then allow sugar to appear in your life. And with the application of knowledge and understanding, then sugar is indeed a blessing, but only a blessing of the natural law of life. So previous experiences have delivered this opportunity to you. And you face the two choices of where or how to live. So when there is two piles of one of sugar, one of salt in front of you, and you are established in your way, keep with the sugar to wash away the salt. And once this boundary has been crossed and established, and one chooses never to go back to the life of salt, then, of course, one can move on with greater rewards and greater understanding. And one will establish themselves in greater truth or gain more energy rather than it being taken away. And the way forward is established now. So this may seem like a rather strange story to start with, but it become apparent when I get to the second part of the talk. So now may I have the healing lists of names, please?
Yes, thank you, Ignatius. Graham and Wendy, Charlotte, Darren, Evie, and Olivia, Matt and Laura and Molly, Max and Mike, Grace, Shelley and Carrie, Taylor, Craig and Amanda, Hannah, Matt and Peta, Caitlin and Gareth, Natalie and Maddie, Chantel, Lucy and Michael Caputo, Vera and Beth, Barbara, Sheila and Chloe, Tan, Joy and Corey, Ross, Howard and Chris, Kathleen and Anne, Karen, Ross, Lily, Amanda Kay, Alex, Rob, Susie, Aiden, Abby, and Brett, Jill, Britt, Mason, Stephen, Matthew, Eric, Marianne, Jody, Louise, John, Andy, Don, Danielle, and Mirabai, Susanna, Jonathan C., and Amrita, Raquel, William, and Jasmine, Stephanie, Allison, Linda, Cynthia, Adriana, Dave and Keiko and Django Cat, Sean and Brian, Helen, Timmy the cat, Kevin and Susie, Helen Lunk, Deborah. Love and healing to all those in need, both unknown and known to us. And of course, may all be happy.
In this series of talks, we have been working through the evolution vibrationally of a particular person in a very fictional way. We said at the beginning that there are those which struggle through the heavy vibrations of shame and despair and feel very trapped within that world. But over a period of time, they begin to look slightly outwards until they want to explore the world in ever-increasing amounts. They have fear of their resistance to what they may experience. But they have desires of wanting to explore the world, and when these desires get frustrated, there is anger. But when the desires work well and one performs a certain way, then there is pride. And pride being expressed outward, one tells the world that, look what I have done. But this pride is fragile. It is fragile because the internal world is also fragile. And although one now is moving through the world and exploring it, one could easily tumble all the way back down, because pride, when rejected by other people, then becomes potential breeding ground for maybe more shame and despair. So the cycle may live again. But right at this point is a critical border. And the border then means one must step across it and explore what is true. This is a very big boundary for one's spiritual evolution. And one must truly start to develop the next quality of courage in order to the way one must live their life. Pride, being ever so fragile, would always run the risk of tumbling into nothingness. But courage starts to be more and more established within the individual. Courage being established, this is seen as an internal belief. It is a quality that is within each individual. And the courage then starts to build on the inside. It is the looking inwards which will establish the courage. And one who possesses courage will actually give as much energy into the world as it takes from it. Where pride is draining to the being, courage is in balance. It gives as much as it takes. One with courage will look inwards, and all gratifications, if they come, or feedback, rather than being expressed outwardly, one with courage will pull the feedback internally and internally review where they are, what they are doing, and what they must do. So then one with courage is full of determination and fortitude, where once it was sadness and despair and fright. All fears, when they first are seen with courage, they are seen and very much felt. But one will act with courage despite the fear. And as one becomes more established in courage, then the fears start to lessen, and one can begin to move through life with less and less fear within the being. And in fact, in these early days, the fear that arises, one with courage will actually look for and start to see, what is this fear? And where fear was once something that held one back, now fear is a source of progress. Let me look at what is wrong. Let me look at what I am feeling. Let me look at this fear and see if it is true. One looks then at this fear and sees that it is, in fact, for one's benefit at this stage, where before it was in the way of all of life exploration. So one of courage now is starting to, despite the fear moving forward, but still looks for the fear to assist one's growth. So one with courage feels like they are in charge of the destiny of their own soul, where previously the world was in charge of the destiny of one's soul. So all of the view now is internal, and the expressing of the internal truth outwards. So the truth becomes greatly or more and more established, where truth is the enemy of the ego. The ego does not like truth because it sees that it will be revealed for its false nature. Now, with a person possessing and building in courage, truth is seen as an ally. Truth is seen as something that must have and must be prevalent. And truth is not seen as an obstacle, but rather an asset that one can use and to be part of its foundation for its own growth. So as one becomes established with truth, then any falsehood is obnoxious. One who has courage, the falseness of others will be seen through and rejected as often as possible. The falseness that one gets thrown in their path, one will walk around and carry the badge of truth and move forward. The courageous look out into the world and see the world as an adventure, see the world as an opportunity, where previously it is full of darkness and monsters. So the light is being turned on here, and courage now becomes a driving force, a very essence of a spiritual life. It comes as the first expressions of spirit, because truth then is seen as spirit. And all of this is an internal work. It is internal first, and expression into the world second. One holds the badge of courage, not on one's shoulder or lapel, but on one's heart. So the courageous look at the true expression of heart, the true expression of self, and therefore want to remove all burdens in the way of that truth. So with courage comes truth at the rejection of pride and arrogance and falsehood. So at this point, one is rejecting the salt and becoming more established in the sugar. Fear is still there in the beginning, hence the need for sugar to wash away the salt. So one then can establish oneself in the spiritual life and also in the spiritual expression. But if one starts to try to express a false courage, it is no more than pride, and always on tender ground, and may crumble when one sees through it. So the work must be the establishment of the connection to spirit, connection to truth, and the building of courage. Now think of a being with courage, whoever that may be. Maybe a myth of some hero that you can conjure in your mind, having to go into the world and fight the dragon. If the ego establishes itself here, then the being would come back into the life of the community and profess about all the dragons one has slain. And one would become a hero of the village. Until one day someone looked deeper into that life and realized no dragons would ever have been conquered. But one who is established in truth would leave the village with the intention of fighting the dragon, not just for the village's benefit, but also for the hero's benefit. And this hero would travel to worlds unknown, to lands not within its knowledge, and know that there is establishment of truth there. There is nothing to be but oneself, where the ego is always pretending to be something other than itself, some creation or other. So our story of ants and salt and sugar is this borderland, the establishment of one's spiritual life, the honoring of the interior world and not the external world. One is now on the border between subject and object, the interior feeling and rewards, rather than the exterior apparent rewards, which are no more than salt. So it's very interesting that one gets to this point, and one must be established in the spiritual life for courage to start to unfold. It may not be overnight, but rather the result of a series of events where one is looking inward. But there are practices that you can use to affirm your life of sugar, of courage. The first is to know of this border world between salt and sugar, between pride and courage. To know that all beings must sometimes cross many times that boundary between the two. Because even if one is living a life of courage, pride is still a temptation at this stage. And one should look out for it. This, of course, is the remnants of salt. So the practices must be the establishments in truth, establishments of your inner truth. So find your connection to your truth first. Resolve that truth is written on your heart. Tell the truth. Tell the truth internally if you do not wish to do it externally. Look for your light inside. Establish your camp around that light. Know that fear is natural, and fear will eventually become your friend until it's absorbed into truth and courage and will become part of your past. Know that fear will arrive, and which will you pick? Salt or sugar? It is very natural in the early stages to have both. So the boundary here means one must establish them on true qualities. So all temptations of, let's say, a primal emotions become less and less appealing. Always the temptation to go back while there's still some salt in the being. But the primal emotions that once ruled the life of one so long ago, the establishment of true emotion, of true spiritual qualities gets ever stronger. And the rewards of love are now known. The temptation to anger becomes lessened. And the feelings of what one must do would be established always in first the sugar, the true self. So I'm sure in times of your life you have made great changes. Maybe you are on the border of them now. And if you face a great change, know this story, and then you will know your outcome. Are you pulled into the life of salt? It is oh so appealing and so known and so natural. Or will you trust the guide who says, take some sugar and look inwards and see what it does? And then your path will be set, a little rocky to begin with. But now this strange being that we are describing in this series of talks has crossed this threshold and becomes more and more established in the true life of a spiritual person. As I said, the remnants of temptation get ever increasingly left behind. The rewards of the physical world and the needs of the physical world are less and less important. Does not matter what one gains financially, materially, or in many other ways. In fact, one is more and more willing to surrender all of those things as the life internal, the courageous life that must step forward. So the courageous at this stage need first the understanding of the internal world, the establishment there, the realizations fear is of benefit to them. And then they can go into the world and look to test themselves. Test themselves maybe against dragons or some evil enemy that must come into their life, but that is only a representation of the old life. And they must establish themselves on what their inner truth says. And then we go forward with courage of heart, forever with them, about then stepping onwards into our next level of spiritual growth. So if you want to cross this threshold from old to new, you must see this story. Know that it is natural. Know that once you cross, you'll be tempted to go back more in the beginning than at the end. The remnants will be with you for a little while. Focus on courage. Focus on courage. So if you have a project that you wish to do, this is described in this story also. The project, are you going to sit still and do nothing? Or are you going to taste the sugar and have courage and fear and step forward? It is very tempting at this stage when one makes a few steps of progress to rest and to be still. But rest will prune project. And as a result, limit it. Don't limit your progress. With rest, courage must be expressed. Don't rest on your first feeling of it, but feel your courage. Do your work. Tackle your demons. No fear is important to you. And each demon that you fear, each project you establish, each talk when you must give that you have fear, you still give. All of this means the establishment in courage. But sitting still after your first step will mean gradually over time your head will turn back towards salt and you'll be pulled into the life of old. So when then beginning steps into the new world, your progress is difficult and one looks back. One looks back and thinks salt is all I know. It wasn't so bad, was it? It was kind of what I knew. It was easy. It was comfortable. But can you truly go back to salt when you have tasted sugar? So no rest at this stage. Know that you must establish, re-establish, and go out into the world soon enough. You'll walk into the world with fear in your heart, but return to your village without fear. Only if there was pride will fear still be with you. So once then you've established your courage and you've made the big step and continue to make the steps, are you then ready for the further evolution of your spiritual path? And it is that we will talk about next week. Until then, see your land of salt and sugar. And decide which you want. God bless you all.